We don't have any other. We don't have any water downstairs, so I got
Okay.
the.
Why is American beer like making love in a canoe? It's fucking near water.
I've heard that, and it's
I am
true.
so glad the recording caught that.
That's awesome.
That is the
Okay.
best introduction ever. Zach,
Yes.
please take it away. Introduce our guests.
I'm Zach Glazer. God damn it, that's me. I still can't figure out why they call the show that, but it's because I have shirts named after me. But I'm here with Alex Kammer and some young person that he's never introduced before named Ed Greenwood. You may have heard of him from some small things, like Forgotten Ones. But anyway, Alex, go ahead and talk a little bit about what it is, how we're going to talk, and then let Ed talk about himself briefly, and then we'll go.
Yeah, that sounds good. So those of you who are fans of the show may remember that I was on about a week ago, maybe 10 days, and we had a fun time recording a show. Afterwards, we got to an approximate time limit. We turned off the recording, and then Zach, Skeeter, and I continued to chat about all kinds of stuff, mostly about projects and what we're working on, and some of the challenges, design challenges that we're all mulling through, and we're giving each other ideas. And I got some actual useful stuff from that, and actually implemented some of those things that we talked about. And then I was thinking, and then just as we were close to wrapping up, I said, guys, what just happened, this kibitzing, this confabbing we just did, I think that would be interesting for people to see, to hear, and to hear how game designers, even knuckleheads like us, how we come up with our stuff and how we get help from our fellows. So that's the genesis of this conversation. I'm writing. We're all writing things. We all have things that not roadblocks, but challenges, design challenges that are very helpful to talk through with friends who have experienced similar things. I find it tremendously useful. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. Just sort of talk about some of the design things we're working on, and have an organic conversation about what my problems with these guys think, and vice versa, and kind of kick it around.
So, what does Ed bring to the table?
Yeah, I don't know. He seems like a good up and comer.
Yes. No, I'm older than dirt, which means when I started, you wrote stuff in longhand. And if it wasn't legible, you typed it. And then you sent it to the gaming company, and their secretarial pool input it into a mainframe using terminals, punch cards, reel-to-reel tape, smoke signals. The world was black and white.
HAL 9000 used to edit your work, huh?
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
You're saying. Yeah.
And there was no, you couldn't squeeze more words in. There were no web enhancements. There was no place to dump your extra pixels. There were no pixels. So if you wrote too much, chop.
Well, can I ask you a question about that directly?
Yeah.
What is the difference between designing that way with tools just like that versus actually designing today with the tools that you see? Do you think you got a better product the other way sometimes because you were forced to do all your thinking maybe a little more concise, and rather than move on, I'll get back to it and edit it later? No? Okay.
No. Back in those days, when I wasn't writing for Dragon was pure fun most of the time. And it was, although there were some assignments, it was very sort of loosey-goosey. It was like doing a newspaper. Hey, Ed, give me 5,000 words on this. Never that long, but, give me 5,000 words on that. Here's the ILO. Well, by the time it reaches you through the mails, you have 1 day to get the stuff to me.
Wow.
That sort of stuff. So you never had time for choosing your words carefully. You had to hit the ground running. There was never any time. We sometimes rescued products. I'm not going to mention which ones they are.
Thank you.
From the classic era of TSR, I have gang rescued a product over a weekend. 2-day weekend. And then
I can't ask, but my insides are begging me to, but no.
Yeah, we'll do that when the recording stops.
Yeah,
we'll get the real dirt.
Then on Monday, it hit FedEx.
Wow.
And the reason we had, using TSR's account, that's the era. And the reason we had those days, because in those days, FedEx didn't pick up or deliver on Saturdays in Canada because, it was a backward, savage country.
Metric system.
They didn't have to compete, so
Didn't
they
have
didn't.
Saturdays.
Yeah, so I couldn't return something that arrived on Friday. I couldn't return it until Monday. Good, I got 2 days. Whoa!
Wow, all the time. You got 48 whole hours.
Now, okay, to give TSR their due, they deliberately treated me like a Hollywood blue sky man. Hey Ed, what do you got on Sembia? What do you got on Cormier? What do you got on Kalimshan? And they didn't care about length because they knew that would slow me down because I couldn't decide what to put in and what to leave out. And I'd be like your grandmother packing for a month's vacation and you give her the tiniest suitcase.
Oh Lord.
And she's
you
going,
nailed it.
Oh my goodness.
You should
which
be a
shoes?
storyteller.
And she would run around the room going, oh dear, not, but I can't use it. I can't fit everything in, and so to avoid that time waster, they would just say, give us all you got on that. 70 pages later, they would hand it to the secretarial pool to input, and they'd just chop off whatever they wanted and save it for another product. Because
this is all handwritten longhand notes.
But by then they had a secretarial pool and they had a mainframe, and the mainframe, until it ran out of memory, actually had room for all the excess, because it wasn't really that. I wasn't sending them usually graphics that were taking. I was sending them text, so they could just save it for another thing. There is one drawback to using your secretarial pool. You're writing, methinks prithee do not know how I trow, and a Midwestern middle-aged mom who is moonlighting as a part-time secretary is going, dear sirs, it has come to our attention, because they're used to American business English. And
doesn't quite translate.
And they're looking at these words and going, I don't know. I'll just say, we are interested in your product, and they're changing it into language that is totally inappropriate. And then, of course, a game designer will read it and go, he must have been drunk.
Well, I think that's still a common response a lot of times. We get manuscripts, I do the same thing.
but and then later on, to avoid that, you see, at the beginning they loved it because they were getting tons and tons of extra realms lore they could just dump into other products. Right. FR5, Savage Frontier, I wrote almost all of that except what Paul did with Eric the Alchemist and so on. But I wrote it for FR1, Waterdeep in the North, and they just took it and got an extra product out of it. But later on, it was like, Ed, this is giving us tons of extra work. I'm going to email you this. And before that, it was, I'm going to send you a diskette. And it's going to have on it a template, a Word template.
Oh, wow.
This is the layout for this product. Just type in this. If it doesn't fit, change the wording till it does.
Oh,
so that way and by the way, that was the secret of writing for TSR. They were like anybody else. They wanted their workday to go well.
Oh yeah.
So if you did all the stuff for them and gave them no headaches, not a lot of editing, not a lot of things they had to change, they loved you and said, give us more. Oh, why don't we hire him to do that? Because, he'll deliver something we can use. And it's like everything else. If you make yourself indispensable around the office, you continue to be hired.
Yep.
And it was basically play the game. And playing the game meant you were not trying to come up with new rules for everything. New monsters, new magic items, new spells, but you were sort of reading all the products as they came out, trying to sense the company's tone, what they were interested in, where they were heading, and give them that. It's like what they used to call in college barf back. It doesn't matter what you think the mating habits of the ancient Hittites, or how the dung beetle works. What does the professor think? Barf it back at him, you get a good mark.
So they wanted icing, not cake.
No. Because in this case, they needed a substantial product to add a
Right.
section to the world. But if you could deliver it to them in dressing, in the line dressing, so they didn't have to change the writing style.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you sense that products were told in this tense, with sentences about this long, using this sort of level of language of vocabulary words, you gave them that. Then it fit. It fit the line look. They were happy. I learned that the hard way when I did Spellfire,
I bet.
and I sent them to the dictionary about 18 times.
Yeah.
And they used a Webster's, which is not a dictionary.
Damn.
Okay, sorry. That
Webster
boom.
slam.
I love it.
No.
That is the greatest lie I've heard yet.
No.
Sorry.
Merriam-Webster's now, with the website and everything, that's proper. But what I meant was, in the 1960s, anybody could publish a dictionary that had the word Webster's on the title. It was in effect broken copyright. Anybody could.
It's the raised pizza of dictionaries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some of them were as bad as, say, Microsoft Word's glossary is now. A tiny working vocabulary plus modern American business jargon, which meant you use any medieval word or any British spelling, and it just kicks it out. It's
Right.
never seen it before.
Yeah, I have to add a ton of things to the dictionary in my Word file all the time.
Well, I add it to our office SharePoint, but
Yeah.
I have to say, one of the things when I do my writing, which is not that common anymore, I use a Roget's 1912 thesaurus. An actual,
Bingo.
It has no spine left. It's falling apart, but it has the 906 is the greatest sorcery word section ever. And so,
Nerd.
and so I get it. I know.
And I use Oxford dictionaries, and I'm an old guy, so the 1 foot rule applies. The dictionary should be within 1 foot of your keyboard.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Good one.
Alex, you have 900 books within 1 foot of your keyboard right now. What do you think?
Yeah, what are the percentage of books that Ed has written behind you right now? Don't look, just guess.
I don't have to. Well, I can't not look because they're both behind and in front of me via the screen. I guess I can look over here.
The bar!
Yeah, exactly. I'll be back, guys.
Yeah.
I have all the Forgotten Realms boxes right sort of mid-back behind me, so it's a lot. Many.
Yeah.
So before we get too derailed in stories, because I could listen to this like for 100 years, Alex, you have a specific design question that popped up from last session, and with the way that Ed was just describing how TSR used to be, how does that correlate with what you're working on now?
Well,
I mean, is it worlds different? It seems like it.
Of course. So I'm working with the Brady that you see in your upper left, and the Frog God Games, and the what they've done, which is so great, is say, Alex, we're cool with just about anything that you do. You take your time, you take as much time as you want. You can put together really any product that you want. We want to hear about it before we actually go forward with it. But I'm not getting a template and say, hey, fit your stuff between these lines. I wouldn't be able to do that. So this is wonderful. And the product I'm working on now is with my good friend Alan Patrick, and we're developing a part of the Lost Land setting, which is a beautiful hardbound book that's about to come out. It was kickstarted, and I can't wait to get my greasy fingers on my copy. I have the PDF, and it's been extremely helpful.
It's sitting in the port of Seattle. So.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and I can't wait to get the actual paper copy. Because, like you, Ed, I don't like PDFs. I get offered PDFs all the time, and I usually download them and I dump them into a file, but I very rarely do I open them.
Right. When your eyes are this age, or your eyes are this age, you've read on screen enough. Yeah. You've edited on screen enough. Yeah. And you want the tactile. You want to hold that book.
Very true. Very true. And by the way, that's been proven true by our print on demand effort with the Border Kingdoms book. That has been.
And I know you guys can't see it right now, but the Border Kingdoms is off to your side on this screen. So it's been here showing off the whole time we've been recording.
My copy hasn't arrived yet, so I'm like, ah!
Oh, that's really that's frustrating.
Yeah.
I have mine.
My copy hasn't shown up yet.
That's right. Taunt me.
I
Taunt me,
shouldn't
sir.
Now I feel bad. I taunted at Greenwood.
No, it's okay.
I gotta, yeah. If it doesn't show up the next week, I got another way to get you one where basically you order it through your account. And do it
Oh,
that way.
okay. Okay.
The-
Yeah,
the
tell me about
notes.
that some other time. Yes, we will do this. Because, yeah.
So anyway, I'm working in this developing a spot in Los Angeles called the Haunted Steppes, and it's a far northern region, far the northeastern extreme of this world, and it's basically populated by tribes of Mongol-like folk who have lived there for generations, and has very rich history of resisting a malignancy, a evil force in the north out of what's called the Shadowlands, and has all kinds of interesting lore which I won't get into. But that's the setting, and that's the adventure that we're writing in that very ambitious, sweeping adventure. And it's because of the breadth of the product. What we're talking about, we've got several design challenges that were encountered. So here's one of them, just for you guys to consider. I think it's always difficult when you try to write something that has an element of being dynamic, meaning that the text is supple and facile enough to react to what players do. We can write, if they do this, they go here, or if this, that, there. But what, the classic example that DMs face is, let's go back to the Caves of Chaos. You have a foray into the caves, and then you back off, and you go and you camp. Well, it's not a pause button, and the monsters don't sit there and wait for the adventurers to come back, which we often did as DMs because it was hard to figure out what the hell happens. All right, so do the gnolls go talk to the orcs and say, "Oh my God, the hobgoblins have been killed," or and so what we're trying to then is to get to come up with a way to make some temporal urgency to affect player choices and have that the clock matter and affect the story later in the book.
Can you define temporal urgency?
Time. Like if you don't get to some place and do a thing by a certain time, then this happens.
I remember
The
us
dragon
talking
wakes
about it,
up.
but just in case.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the steppes. So it's grasslands.
Yes.
So someone starts a giant grass fire.
Yep. That
That was quick.
Yes. I mean, yeah. You to get hustle. I mean, sure. But I mean, it's more the how to build it mechanically, I guess, is what we're trying to get to.
So you want to inject some existential dread to move people along.
Well, it also depends on the level of your players, because you could do that on one level by saying, if we don't get the crops off before that army arrives and tramples them, we're all going to starve come winter. Then you have a time boggle. But if your players don't care or never think about that, and you're not playing at that level, it's like, yeah, so. And
there's gonna be a lot of players that are like that. Like, hey, I'm just here to game for 4 hours. I don't care about the campaign level ramifications of my actions. I may or may not be that way sometimes.
Well, I mean, this is a campaign book, so
Right.
The presumption is that people are, even if they're not invested, then there has to be then you have to pay the price, though.
I agree.
That's to I guess legislate that fairly is the trick.
Yeah.
And that's
because I remember 2 or 3 scenes in fantasy literature, including Eddings the Belgariad, where somebody says, I can't answer your call. I can't muster and join the army because we have to get the crops off. And somebody says, if you delay, we'll all be too dead to eat. But if we beat them, we can invade their thing and eat their crops. They'll be too dead to eat them. And and that's just echoing what H. Beam Piper did in Lord Kelvin of Otherwin. But you have to have a campaign in which those sort of conversations would occur. So of course that hands you the design dilemma. Do you design a dungeon crawl with intrigue and with exports, imports, and how you're okay? The Donald Trumps of this world, or by what I mean is people who make money off investments, as opposed to punching the clock and then hammering something all day and then saying, "Oh, closing time," punching the clock and leaving. So they don't produce an item at the end of the day. They make their money through investments. How do you build that into your regional source book?
You mean like wealth transference versus wealth creation?
Yeah, well, yeah, imports, exports. If you're rogue, or as we used to call them in earlier editions, thief, needs to hold up this merchant, this handy merchant who's passing with a wagon. Why is the merchant taking the danger of traveling away from home while he's taking goods from a place that's producing excess goods and taking them to where there's a scarcity or relative scarcity so he can sell them for money? So that builds in imports, exports, and how do you put that in a source book and make it attractively packaged so you don't have teenage gamers go, I just finished school for the day, slam the book, and because they're not interested, but you can make it vitally interesting. And if you're world building, if you're campaign building, you have to do that. You have to put that in there.
So, Alex, do you think this would be something that could be addressed in a specific background? Since we're talking, I'm assuming you are writing this for 5th edition.
True.
And there are game mechanic specifics to that edition that might actually be helpful. Mm-hmm. So, if there is a Haunted Steps background,
there are. We have 4 custom backgrounds.
Yeah, so you could write some urgency into that background. You're a child of this land that has been torn by blah 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 blah, and
that's the interesting part, the blah blah.
Well,
actually, that raises a very interesting thing. All those games where you have victory conditions that conflict. Mm-hmm. The player playing this needs this, but the player playing that needs this other thing. They can't both win. You could build those into character backgrounds. This merchant, if he makes this much money, he's advancing. Yeah, but he's got to get the money from this other guy. And the other guy's background is, no, I have to keep all my money, not give it away to merchants. So you could build it into...
Anyway. Red Hand of Doom did that really well because there was a protracted battle, and as you won different skirmishes in the battle, you acquired points, and as you did other things, you got more points, and at certain gates of the adventure, depending on your points, other things happened, or more specifically, did not happen to you. So that might be something as well to consider, some kind of point value system. If you do X, Y, and Z, terrible thing is not going to happen to you. If you do X and Y, a bad thing is going to happen to you, but not the terrible thing.
Sure, and it's easy to conflate when you talk about this, and this is why it's tricky, I think. Conflate motivating players, story hook, with mm-hmm. dynamic elements in your writing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's the challenge. What I find myself doing as I try to address this concern is overwriting. You can't say if the players do this, then mm-hmm. and if they do that, you just can't do that too. I want to, all of our goals is to write the product that everyone can play, right? Yeah. So the experienced DM GM can pick it up and say, yep, got it. Or the first time a novice DM can read it and give as much guidance as you can give without just boring the hell out of everyone else. And so that's always the struggle, especially with that element. I struggle with that piece of it, not override encounters.
That's the story tree problem.
Yeah.
From the choose your own adventure books.
Mhm.
You had a limited number of pages. So there was a limit to how much you could say. If the players do this, then this. If the players do that, you could do an exhaustive list, but you run out of pages and be unable to tell the story.
I found that one way I got around that when I did the big one that I did, one of the two big ones, was not presenting as if they do this, they do that. If they show up now, it's this. If they show up now, it's that.
Right.
If they've been there once, it's this. Second time, it's that. It's like just basically A and B are two things that matter to, I think, the story. So if they show up at night, X is this. If they show up at day, it's this. So it was never like 15 things. It was 2. Sure. And then a lot of the other choices were narrowed down because you figure that out based on, okay, they're here at night. There could be a lot of reasons they're there at night. They could have gone back, camped, or whatever. But that answers that question. So it's just making it more of a bimodal option than it was presenting 15 kinds. And that was my cheating way to get around that, was because I knew I wanted to avoid making that all over the place, but I couldn't help myself. And so rather than make it so many options, I just would narrow it to 2. And it would be a situation of either day or night, or I've camped and I haven't. And so,
and that's what we're going to end up doing too. It's not going to be day or night. It's going to be either they're there in time or they're not.
Yeah. And the same kind of thing though. It's an event. It's the trigger. It's like a gate, right? They're back and forth. So
now there's another way you can do that, but not in a source book. It'd have to be in a small compass module. The other way of doing it is to say, here are your NPCs that you're using. Here's what they want in any situation. And then you can shut up about everything because the Dungeon Master looks down at this 1 or 2 sentences for each. Oh, the king is always going to want this. The vizier is always going to want that.
Mm-hmm.
So he has guidance for any situation, but it doesn't work.
NPC motivations being the way you control. Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
And this is an adventure. This is not a course book. Okay. So this is going to be there's world building elements to it, but this is going to be a level 1 through 15 or 16th level.
Okay. I used to do that for the realms for one thing. For every clergy, I would say, here's what they want right now, like in the next week, months, whatever, and here's their long-range goals.
Okay.
And I'm not talking now holy or faith-based goals. I'm talking about the real-world goals.
Money.
We want to corner the market in silk because we'll get nice and rich because we need money to do all these good works.
That would be interesting.
But what do I want this month? Well, there's this one official in town or in the city that doesn't want me to get the silk monopoly. He has to have an accident. You see what I mean? So there's a immediate goal in your adventure. Could you arrange that guy to have an accident? Nothing fatal. We just want him off his feet for about 2 weeks. We need 2 weeks. And then the other one is, and then we'll have the silk trade.
Factions. I mean, that makes factions interesting, and it gives you a lot to play with. That's interesting.
Well, it would be a great thing to add to the major NPCs in the back is short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. Like what do you want to do immediately? What do you want to see have happen? Especially if those NPCs are going to be around for the life of the campaign. One of the things that people don't consider a lot is having an NPC that starts at first level be a party foil long-term. I mean, eventually they're going to gain levels as well.
Sure.
And their motivations change.
Well, I love basically part of what you're going to see with this book is introducing, I aspire to creating the Lost Lands versions of Volo, of an enduring NPC.
That guy's overrated.
No, because that raises another great point. Go on, Alex. I don't.
No, just that. Okay. So this is going to be the who's going to introduce the book. I've written that, and this is going to be the hiring NPC. I like calling characters instead of NPCs, but whatever. And then he fades into the background, hops on a ship, and we'll see him in some other book.
Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you about Volo very quickly. Yeah, okay.
Is he based on a
Elminster,
real person that you know?
no,
Oh,
no,
because that would have been great.
no. From the beginning, the realms had an unreliable narrator because in those days, every player who read the stuff that I knew who played D&D in my area around Toronto in Canada, every player read all the stuff as well as every DM, and you could. There was so little coming out, you could keep up. What that meant was I had to build elbow room for the dungeon master in, so the guy who'd memorized everything before he came to the gaming table didn't know it's all right. There's only 6 pirates in this room. I got this, fellas. You had to build in the space so the dungeon
Right.
master could have something different. So from the beginning, the realms had unreliable narrators. Elminster being the big one. Elminster knows too much, so we had to come up with a guy who screwed up all the time and here was
That's
the problem.
awesome.
And so Jeff Grubb
It's the
came up with
me of the Forgotten Realms.
okay. There's a real place called the Volo Bog. If you
Oh,
drive
wow.
Route 12 from Richmond up to Lake Geneva, you drive right past the Volo Bog. And Jeff Grubb said, "Why don't we call this guy Volo?" The Marco Volo thing came along later. That was somebody else being clever. No, not. Anyway, the thing about Volo is, and I built this in right away. Okay, let's make him like the European rogue character, like Till Ugespiel, and there are various versions in various cultures. The guy who Baron Munchausen was another one,
Yeah.
who screws up all the time. Well, the nice thing about that is when you're handed an assignment that says, Ed, do the fantasy version of the United States of America. Make sure you include everything. You have 12 pages. Okay,
Sure.
which if you look at the Volo's guides, the digest sized Volo's guides, that happened all the time.
Yeah,
I'd say,
it's right behind my screen.
yeah, but I
Yep.
can't cover all that in that
Right.
few pages. So Volo would be kicked out of a place or not even allowed to go in it because of past indiscretions. So it could get really light one-page coverage in a Volo's guide. So I could cover the Dale Lands, the North, the
Right.
Sword Coast.
Right.
And it's like, the Sword Coast, that should be 8 books that size. So that's how I won that argument. An unreliable narrator who can't do things or can't cover things. So that's the other reason. So you can build in the dungeon master's vagueness. Like Elminster, instead of the omniscient narrator from my early dragon articles, there are 6 orcs in room 3 in the castle. Elminster says it's rumored that the castle has orcs in it, but I don't credit it myself. And then you just built in the dungeon master's wiggle room.
Nice. So
My
this is
yeah.
perfect. I have to ask a question, and you will see why I'm interrupting you, Alex. I'm
No,
sorry. So obviously, when writing this kind of stuff, story is king. You have to have a good story going on.
Story
How
is always king.
but how much do you lean on what is written in the rules to further the story? Like using game mechanics to further the story. Like for 5th edition, I mean, this is going to be great for Ed because he's gone through many incarnations of the rules. It's going to be great to hear this. But like 5th edition has the backgrounds. So that's something you can add to design that's part of the game mechanics. In other rule editions, how much have you guys you leaned on the rules to further the story? Anyone?
The practical answer to that was always, would my editrix flog me when I saw her at Gen Con? Would she let me get away with it? Would she demand use of game mechanics? Because quite often there was, by the way, we've just added this in this new Splat book. Make sure you use it
Right.
in the next thing. So then you have to. But no, the story has to stand on its own. But at the same time, it has to feel like D&D. If you're writing for D&D in the realms, it has to feel like D&D, not like, say, Starfinder. It has to feel like a D&D story. But beyond that, never let game mechanics get in the way of a good story. And there are times when you have to come up with rules on the fly, like the James Bond Casino Royale card game, gambling game. You might want to come up with very quickly. If you don't want to role play this all the way through, then roll a d8 and then this happens. Here's my mini table. We used to do falling tables or leaping the chasm tables like this all the time. And they'd say, no, just use the one in the rule book. No. The whole point of this is that the whole ledge you're standing on is crumbling and sliding down into the chasm when you arrive. So you have to jump off this moving, falling thing. You don't have time to plant yourself. So we can't use the rules. Let's come up with specific rules, because can you grab that stalactite or whatever? So you set up this situation and you just give you a little potted rules right there.
Like that's something I'm really a big fan of, because I did a couple of things with that on my own. I would do things like ambience type rules, using mechanics that are similar of like, okay, these are the sounds. Here's 10 possible sounds. They all are kind of eerie. Sometimes there's no sound as an option. But if you have that, say, okay, rather than Warner Monster counter, use this. And it kind of give an option to lend ambience. It's not really a mechanic, but it's there. And the other one is I would have alternate combat methods to make it easier and harder. And I would detail those 5 situations where, okay, you can figure out these ways. Here's a matrix one to do it. Here's the dice roll to get 3 possible solutions. Do it quick. And so I would give options there in a page or two for like encounter areas. So you would have the ability to bring rules to your story without like it overwhelming it if you chose not to do it. And so I would do it in 2-page appendix. That was my rule.
And actually that brings up another useful thing, particularly in the early time in the hobby, but it continues all the way. There are some dungeon masters who never ever use a published adventure as it's written. They read them for entertainment and then they pluck stuff from them. Oh, I like that magic sword. Oh, I like that cute little encounter.
Yeah.
Oh, that thing where you can push everybody through the floor into the boiling acid. I'm going to use that sort of thing.
80% of our customers, I think.
Yeah. Well, so if you put a cute mechanic or a cute little table of sounds or something in your adventure, there's somebody who says, I'm not running this adventure. My players don't give a hoo-ha about Robin Hood and his merry men. But I can sure use this archery miss table so that when they're so that you get the noble in the behind or up his nose or whatever, because I can use that anywhere.
Honestly, archery miss table automatically wants to start writing. That's such a great prompt.
Well, you just work out what are the comedic misses.
No, I'm already there with you. So
yeah.
You win.
So can I interject another discussion that is not only that my co-author and I are working on, but it's also a piece of what's going on in D&D broader sense. So Call of Cthulhu, of course, the central mechanic is insanity. Mm-hmm. And D&D has never really handled that as a core rule. Every iteration of the DM's guide has some sort of madness rules, but it's always it's usually a list of phobias or a list of maladies and so on. There's never really been a mechanic about it. And so for two basic, first of all, there's the desire, and quite rightly so, to be sensitive to and considerate of folks with real mental disorders. So that's why some publishers are going away from using the term madness or insanity at all. I think that makes total sense. I understand that discussion, but that's not what I was getting to. I'm the part of what we're grappling with and just coming up and we're having them grappling. That seems like this is such a struggle. This is really fun to come up with corruption, this concept of corruption, because that's really what's going on. There's a force. It's an outside force. It's not revealing a latent mental condition, which is really at the core of what Call of Cthulhu is. This outside force is affecting you physically. It's manifesting itself. It's not just psychological problems. It's rot your hand or whatever, because there's an evil affliction, a pestilential force. I'm just curious as to what your guys' thoughts are on sort of madness, insanity, corruption, all this mechanical.
Well, strangely enough, for a product that I wrote for Frog God Games, I came up with a mental exhaustion table that used the same essential mechanic as physical exhaustion, but it applied to your psyche. And it wasn't a specific, like, oh, you have a mental illness. I mean, that could happen, but it started off very subtly, like you're very tired all the time. So it affects your ability to get spells back. You start to hallucinate and see things. And in the particular house where this happens, it actually allows you to see things in paintings that other people who are not afflicted with this would miss. So it was kind of a layered good bad thing until it got really bad and then you went catatonic, but you know, that was way down. So yeah, there was an effect. It's not the same kind of pestilence effect that you're talking about, but
Well,
the reason I did it that way is it built off of a core mechanic that has been tested and people use. So I just
Mhm.
changed it slightly to fit what I needed in this particular house and called it good.
So, Alex, is that when you're talking about temporal urgency? Is that part of it? Would be where you're talking about doing this in your book? Is that it's affecting you and building up? It's getting worse and worse. So you're trying. Do they know that they're aware of this and they're trying to beat the damage on them, or is it just happening slowly? Is it revealed in a way?
this is why, Zach, I asked you a couple weeks ago, how does magic work in your setting?
Yeah.
Do you have a weave? And of course you don't, you can't. So you just have, it's magic. And so because I was thinking about, because I was starting like, you sense a taint in the weave. You sense a corruption in the weave. You try to tap in either through your divine spells or your arcane, and you still can do it, but something's just not right.
Yeah,
You
I
make it.
remember we were talking about that and talked about the unraveling.
Yep, exactly. That was part of our conversation last time. So we've now moved
Yeah.
that forward to how does this express further along in the adventure? This again, this subtle at first, but building um, set of sequela consequences of spending more time. First of all, more time in this area, and also as they get closer in proximity to the source of it. So we have two axes that are working together and then having effects that will affect the characters. And so that, first of all, it's going to build in some urgency, like, oh my God, my arm's rotting off or whatever.
Right.
And also they're going to know that the stuff is getting worse as we get closer. This must be significant.
Well, the cheap and dirty way, and by cheap and dirty way, I mean easy, little word count, or smallest amount of word count, is physical transformations. You know, you grow scales, your tongue becomes too forked. Oh my goodness, we better hurry, because pretty soon this tongue that I now have to roll up and shove in my mouth, I won't be able to say the incantations. So that you've got a
That's
temporal urgency
disturbing.
there. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, there's the
I was gonna say
thing,
it.
but that's the cheap and dirty way. The way that is much harder and takes more word count and requires more role playing effort is the sort of thing where, you know how in class the people would pass notes, and so
Yeah.
there'd be two conversations going on: the official teacher to students, and then the passing the notes, commenting on it. And it would usually end badly. Uh, I've played in Call of Cthulhu games. David Wise, former manager of TSR, did this. Um, his character became convinced that the stick that we picked up while exploring the tomb had a sentience in it, so he'd keep talking to the stick, and the stick would answer him and give him advice. And of course, the dungeon master had to play the stick, and only he could hear the stick. So they kept having to zip off into a corner so the rest of us couldn't hear them, and then come racing back. So it's a lot more work and consumes time at the table. But of course, this was all a mental, the stick was just a stick.
Yeah.
Everybody who
But
plays now though has a cell phone that you can send those messages.
yes, nowadays, yes.
And so
And
you can make
yeah,
that much easier a process. I think now that would be
yeah.
That's
And
interesting.
David Wise's character was going, "Ah, I save you all! I save you all!" because he talked to the stick and this and told him what to do, and it was all in his head.
Well, I believe, well, I believe, I'll put it this way, that that is where the don't split the party trope came from. It is not because DMs gave a shit about the outcome, the well-being of the players. It just creates a lot of work.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you split the party, you've got to have sidebars and take people out and stuff like that and say, please don't split the party because I'll be forced, it's not going to end well for you. You strengthen numbers and all that kind of stuff. No, sure. It's really because puts a tremendous burden on the DM.
and it splits the immersive experience. Everybody
Sure.
else
Yeah, it
starts
does.
talking about what you're going to do that night, or the TV show you just saw, or the movie,
Yeah.
because you're being neglected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
half
they're
of your
done.
group is no longer
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the challenge with it. As tempting as it is, we've had some sessions. This is the only time I've seen it done well, is when you have multiple game masters.
Yeah.
And that's in the perfect for Call of Cthulhu. That works really well. I think to have someone take someone off, take a couple people off, and bring them back, because the game masters or the keepers have already worked out how this is going to go. That works, but in D&D, I think it's hard.
particularly if they can go into another area.
Yeah.
So you
Right.
go into the dark room, and sitting behind the table is, the gal dressed as Madame Blavatsky, and she says, "So you've come to Madame. That's good." And it's a complete different experience than what you had at the gaming table back there in the other room.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that's what we're working on now, is trying to come up with a set of mechanics that are, first of all, not just going to be tremendously burdensome on DMs and GMs, but also fun and logical. So it makes sense that as this progresses, what is first just a whisper, just something that when you're casting detect good and evil as a first level character, like something, that didn't
Something's
quite
not
go
right.
Yeah, and that's strange too. Like, oh my God, this is, so that's going to be that's what we're working on. It's
Let me go back to when I first played D&D, and there was this lovely gal called September, and introduced us all to D&D, and she had one character who was being affected by a magic item, treasure that we'd picked up. And she kept saying to that character, "Crawling. You can feel it crawling." And then she'd say, "It's a little green." And then we go on with play, and about 5 minutes later, she says, "It's crawling a little higher now." And then we go on with play, and she'd say, "It's at your throat." The player says, "What's at my throat?" "Nothing. Nothing at all." "Oh, am I going nuts?" The walls don't answer. And then 5 minutes later, "It's in your ear now. This ear. Crawling." You know, so there was just and it worked, because all it is the magic of this item starting to affect this person who's carrying it. And they happen to be an arcane spellcaster, a magic user, as we called them then. And
Yeah.
it started to affect the spells, both their accuracy, their area of effect, and the actual damage they did.
Can I ask a design question of you, Ed? Just because you've had so many years of doing it. What do you think of, and I'll tie this in a second. What do you think of like actual tactile, like either cards you could pull out or copy or cut up from a book, or something you could hand a player that have to advance a story? How would something like that enhance an effect like you just talked about that's crawling? Say you gave them, this was the effect from like Alex Adventure. It is here. Here's the card one for the party or for the player that has it, and they have it. They keep it. They keep it in their little card slot. I mean, has that ever been done successfully in your opinion?
Sure. Oh yeah. But the problem is, it's two things. It requires a lot more work, and it slows down play. In the same way that people who are doing theater of the mind can click along faster
Right.
than people who move minis all over a grid.
Right.
It takes longer. Regardless of how good people are with it or comfortable with it, it does take longer. Handouts take longer. They can be gorgeous, particularly if they're handouts of the fantasy equivalent of a message or a treasure map or a newspaper, and you can really get you into the mood. I've done, and early on we did a lot of them at Gen Con when Gen Con was Wisconsin Parkside, a lot less formal than Milwaukee. Milwaukee had cops who might shoot people if you turned around and Green Avengered somebody with a water pistol. So you didn't do this stuff. But in Wisconsin Parkside, we did a lot of it. If you're creeping somebody out, you would have a hidden, and by hidden I mean you'd have a little black tablecloth, and there'd be stuff underneath it, like you're playing Kim's game. The old Kim's game from Rudyard Kipling's Kim. It was a memory aid for people who are going to be spies. You
Right.
put all sorts of different things all over a table,
Yeah.
covered, and then you pull it back. They got 10 seconds. You put it back. Okay, how many things can you name off the table? But we would use the same sort of thing. It would be covered with a black tablecloth. And we'd have a tiny little bowl of cold spaghetti. He says, and you plunge your hand into the casket and you
Yep.
feel his brains, or whatever. But as great fun as that is, and Call of Cthulhu, you do this all the time. You play by candlelight in the dark, and hopefully don't burn your house down in the process. But you can do all sorts of things from mood in the middle of the night. And I've done Call of Cthulhu where whenever anybody sees a great old one, my accomplice, my wife, outside the cottage we were playing would go.
That would be terrifying.
No, I agree. I think when you're really in the right mood in that game,
I would pee on the floor if that happened.
I've seen you.
And there's
almost
also there's also a thing called a night laugh, and I won't do a full night laugh because it'll overload the mics and everything. But you basically go very in the dark, very loudly, very close to somebody. The idea being you say nothing beforehand and nothing afterwards. So it's really abrupt, and everybody goes. And yeah, you do that.
I'm going to start doing that around my house now. I'm sure my wife is going to love that.
Everyone frosty.
Yeah.
Cyrus made a lot of money doing that, Skeeter.
So, Alex, do you think to help your pestilence issue, kind of the overall umbrella effect you're looking for, one of the things that I'm thinking about is if you challenge the player's assumptions of what should be going on to make it slightly out of normal. Like, normally when everybody starts out, they're like, okay, it's a beautiful spring day. You're walking through the grasslands trying to go to this dungeon you've heard about. Like, you could have the nice bright spring day, but then they stumble across like a decaying body. And the grass, like 2 feet away, is perfectly fine, but there's almost like a crop circle of just desolation around this thing. And then, like, the next morning, it's super overcast, but it doesn't have any effect other than to just change the overall mood.
Sure. Yes, I completely agree with that. And the purpose of all the first level encounters, which are not going to be linear, they're written just you can do these in any order you want, is just to establish the weirdness.
Yeah.
That's going on like that. Non-connected events, but they're just all freaking weird.
And you could also do the thing where you lift the platter on what you're served at the inn, and it's a platter of human eyeballs swimming in gore, and you go, and then it's not.
Yeah.
It's now the sausage or whatever.
Perception changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think if you had like a list of potential things, that would be helpful, but don't make it a random table.
No.
Like I think that works against the intent more often than it works for the intent.
Over 70% of dungeon masters in the early days used random tables that TSR printed, not randomly. They read the table and selected stuff from it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
rather than rolling.
We were just joking. Al and I were just joking about this as we're building character backgrounds. If you recall how the backgrounds are set up, there's an ideal and a flaw and the bond.
Right.
And there's in the far left there's a column that says D6 or D8, suggesting you roll, and then you take an outcome. Well, that doesn't make sense, and no one does that because you have a character concept in mind, and you're going to look at the one you would do it for I do it for pre-gen sometimes just because it's funny. You end up with something really contradictory. But for your own character,
Yeah, you would never
you have
do
an
that.
idea, and you're going to pick something that is most analogous to your ethos that you have in mind.
No.
So the same thing with this. I'm going to the tables we're going to build. They'll likely be tiered for different parts of the campaign based on where the characters
Right.
are relative
Well, that
to
makes
level.
sense.
But this should be pick the DMGM pick the outcome that is best. You know, should if they failed their wisdom saving throw, then here's your toolbox to afflict them with.
Yeah, here's
They can. I guess they could do rolls. I mean, we'll try to keep it to even numbers just to, keep that tradition alive. And if were inclined to roll a d8 to do it or whatever, they certainly could.
Yeah, because I think that gets hokey when that mechanic gets used. Like, oh, here's a random effect that happens, and it's like, okay, bubbles shoot out of the sky. It's like, okay, that's cute, but I don't want that.
Well, I did for Seeking's Malice and the physical body changes that I have with the ritual that was in that book. That had a random table because they're all equally bad.
Yeah.
They're all going to be some flavor of yuck that the player's going to be like, oh shit.
Oh, so it's like a typical election. They're all equally bad.
Pretty much. But of course, that gave still the wiggle room for anyone to choose. But there is some charm to the DM saying, "Do you want to roll this or should I roll this?"
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Pick up the D12 and let's see what you get. And
what's great is saying that when there's not a roll involved. When there's an effect that is going to happen, you say, "Okay, do you want to roll or do you want me to roll?"
Yeah.
And then just the bad thing happens. Yeah, I love that. I love the psychological level of gameplay, which, I mean, Alex, you helped me with Crypt a ton for some of there was more richness in background after some of the questions that came up during development were like, well, why does this happen? And I was like, well, shit. Good question. And then it led into more, and then it made more bad things happen to people. Yeah. So it was very helpful to get some different perspective.
Which is why, when we write stuff, we share it with our friends and play test it and all that kind of stuff. Because I've been amazed when some of the logic flaws that people have found in my stuff, I'm like, oh my God, you're right. They go to the other side of the island. I'm fucked. This is all it's never going to work.
Yep.
Oh my God, and so that's exactly why you have to have.
Well, you much rather have it for your friends than you have it once we print the book and they deliver it, Alex. They open it.
Yes. I'd rather look like a knucklehead with that way instead of thousands of paying customers.
In the old days, TSR quite often had us play test little bits, like an encounter or a room, by embedding it in something else we were running at Gen Con.
Oh wow!
So it wouldn't be recognized when it appeared months or years later, but it was to try things because they got burned early. They did Queen of the Deem Web Pits, and they had this room with these 4 pillars, and if you touched any of the 4 pillars, they turned into salamanders. And
I am familiar with that damn room.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but Brian Bloom was really happy with this. This is good, and we ran the thing, and everybody walked in and said, "So just 4 pillars, nothing else?" And they turned around and left. And he's going, ah!
Yeah.
So the thing
Those
had
damn players again.
Yeah.
Well, for the handful of more than several handfuls of people who have been fortunate enough to snag a ticket for a Chris Perkins game at GameWorld every year, he is always play testing some element of a book 2 years out. I still have the battle mat. It's somewhere up here actually that he used in 2016, 13, 14, 15. That was the precursor for Storm King's Thunder, and it was so he was using stuff with it, and no one knew what it was, but that was an element of that book. So yeah, you got to do that. I mean, you've got to test your stuff, and in fact, tomorrow night with the Game Hole, I'm the town of in that where the characters start is Port, little sea town. I'm running them through these non sequential encounters to have them to see how it plays, and I've already gotten great notes. So you just have to do it. Ed, you're the only person I've ever worked with that you write something, and not only is it print ready, but it's solid too. I have to give you. I mean, it's amazing. People ask, well, who's your editor on that project? I'm like, me. So it's
said the same thing. I just want to be honest with you, not to try to impress him. He doesn't need me on my props up, but Jeff Hartnett said it's all the Frog God Games thing. He said, well, the easiest ones by far to edit was Nice Don't Keep. I'm like, well, it makes sense. He's done it a couple times. Now I know he's done it with mainframe computers in the secretarial pool.
That's exactly it. It's not like I'm brilliant or anything. It's like Malcolm Gladwell says, once you put in your 50,000 hours, it gets so that you can do it. But actually, playtesting makes everything better, because one of the things I discover when I'm writing an adventure, I put in these little nuggets for the dungeon master that are a potted description that's like 2 sentences long of this NPC. But if I run it and I have to explain things to players and do the reactions of the old sea dog with the eye patch or whatever it is, the innkeeper who keeps dry washing his hands, whatever it is, I discover that I've added some description in across the table in play that I needed to every time. Oh, that better be down on the page, because it's what I needed to make that character come alive. So the playtest always improves it. And frankly, you can tell with some of the very early TSR stuff, when they had to rescue a product in no time at all and didn't have time to playtest it.
Yeah.
You can sometimes tell. And that happens because in the good old days, pre-digital, if you booked the paper, you booked the press time. It's the same thing that used to happen in comic books. You'd open your copy of Conan the Barbarian 53, and Millie the Model 44 would be in it. Well, sometimes that was just a complete screw up at the printers. But other times it was, oh, the pages didn't arrive in time. Well, this is the time they paid for. Put something inside those covers, staple them, and send them out.
Yeah, I actually remember when I was in a band and we booked studio time. It's like if somebody was late or somebody didn't show up, you got your ass in there and you put something on tape because you paid for that time. And, some of that stuff ends up being great. And some of it is some drunk guy just talking shit for 20 minutes straight. And that may or may not have been me.
Playtesting is important. We're Frog God. We're a low medium level publisher in terms of size, and we rely a lot on GMs to do their playtesting before. But we're starting to look at a lot more formalized playtesting coming up. And partial was suggestion from Alex. Can't remember that you're right there. I'm sorry, I said your last name like you weren't here. No, from Alex. No, from Alex about just about general how he'd seen it done in other companies, and it's just started now to dovetail and make sense into how we're growing. And what you see different when you start asking for that is like everything you said, Ed. It's like all of a sudden, like you notice, like you talk about the Brian Bloom Salamander story, some significant changes that are really important and cool happen when you have a little more formalized process for that kind of stuff. And so when I hear you say that, I'm like, it's true. It really is. He's telling the absolute truth because I've seen it at a company level. I'm so excited.
Play testing, like I only get to play live at conventions. So I have 4 hours. I have a certain amount I can give people. I have a certain amount I can take back from them. So I try to make it, the high points. Let's do this. Let's get some feedback both ways. But there are so many times when I get to the table and I'm like, man, I'm feeling good. This is going to go well. And they throw a monkey wrench into this. And I'm like, there are not 1,000 years I could live where I would have thought of that combination of events. What the hell just happened? And that just makes for better writing.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. There is one trap in this. The more you formalize your playtesting, the more you get a line look to the finished product. Now that could be a good thing, but it also means, oh, this is a Frog God adventure. Oh, this is a Paizo adventure.
Oh, they already have that.
Yeah, yeah. Because the way that they playtest leads to these outcomes. And the more
That's
predictable
interesting.
they get, and that can be good, particularly if, say, you're writing choose your own adventure books. You
Right.
want this because the public expects this. They bought one. They don't want nasty surprises like trails that don't lead anywhere.
Right. Dead ends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but it also means that the truly zany adventures that are different. Let me put it in D&D context. Expedition to the Barrier Peaks.
Was
in the
just
old
going to
days.
say that.
Yeah, with the flow chart of what happens when you pick up an artifact and start pushing its buttons and banging it on the floor and handing it to the barbarian and say, sit on it.
Yeah.
That different thing tends to get squashed out the more formal and more consistent your playtest adventure is.
Right.
There's another way of doing playtests, which is, oh, let's give it to Jeff and all the guys who can get drunk at his house, because we know they're going to do something gonzo with it, as opposed to what our people do in-house. And there was even occasions in which TSR plucked poor, bewildered, middle-aged, non-gamer ladies from the secretarial pool and said, we're going to play an adventure. Oh, but I don't know how to play. Never mind. We're just going to sit around a table and we'll talk about it. And about 10 minutes into it, they say, when do we start playing? You are playing. Oh. And
Yeah.
the reason they were doing that was to take people who were non-gamers, who did not have that background, did not consume the same comic books, earlier game products, TV shows, and movies. So they didn't go, oh, I bet you this is an evil cultist. It would never occur to them. They've got a different background. And how did it strike them? Particularly if one of these middle-aged women, somebody's mother, said, well, that's not fair. Okay, what triggered that reaction? What in your adventure triggered that? Now, you might still want to do that. You might want to have gamers go, oh, you bastard. A beholder inside a beholder. How dare, oh, you, sort of thing. But that's a different reaction.
Wait a minute. I need to take a note on this.
Yeah.
Go on the arrow miss chart.
It is very interesting. As you guys know, I just because of my family situation, I run a lot of kids games these days, and it is interesting playing games, fantasy games with players who don't have any fantasy tropes.
My mom played Bill's game, and she was, why the hell we go there? Who would go to a tower with dead people all around? That's dumb. I'm like, so.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And one of my favorite memories from this last year is one of my daughter's first group, and the first time one of the players fell into a pit trap, they were just fucking shocked. Who would do that? Why is there a hole in the floor deliberately to catch people?
That is awesome.
It's a pit trap. It's a what?
What is the name of their group?
the Rainbow Tentacles.
Yes, I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, when you started tweeting those little photos of them, I thought, oh, to be them. They're getting all of this for the first time. I remember that. That was so great.
This is a perfect segue. Ed, since you have been doing this for so long, is some of the luster gone for the game, or do you still feel invigorated by the game and the challenges?
Okay. Yes and no. The luster has certainly gone for new game editions. Okay. Yeah. Changing things for the sake of making everybody buy the 3 core books all over again. And having a new format, a new way of, because as a designer, I go, damn it, I knew 2nd edition like the back of my hand. And now I have to relearn, and you're using words to mean something different. And oh, geez. It's sort of like when you go into a different math class years later, and you go, oh, that's just so-and-so. Why are you calling it that? Oh, we don't use that word anymore. We now call it
new
this.
math.
Yeah, exactly. And you go, so you're just screwing around with it so you can be the expert and everybody else who used to know what they were doing can't. Thanks. That sort of thing. That the luster for that has gone off. But the luster stays when it's world building and exploring the world. And because TSR has never let me carpet bomb the entire planet of Toro, they keep saying, "Oh, let's do another Waterdeep product." Yeah, I want to do another Waterdeep product, but wouldn't it be nice if we did Score Nouvelle and Seacomber and all these other? No. Nobody will buy those. They'll buy a Waterdeep product. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you know they won't buy them if you never publish them?
What
But
about this little dirty place called the Border Kingdoms?
yeah.
Yeah, what about there?
Yeah. But I mean, that's the point. I wanted to cover the entire globe. And then they'd always change editions on me.
Yeah.
We'd start all over again. And I go, guys, I haven't finished yet. Oh, yeah, but and we've discontinued the Living Jungles. So we don't. And we discontinued the Living Cities. So we don't, it's like, guys, you know how many of your audience you're stranding every time you do that? Yeah, but we can't do everything. Well, okay, I get that corporately, but I don't get that because they're gamers, and you've just taken their dreams that they've invested on and said, "You guys don't matter." Don't do that.
Well, the Realms has enjoyed a fantastic longevity, and thank you very much for that. You must be doing something right.
It's
the
not
beard,
me.
man.
It's the beard. Yeah.
One designer beard.
Yeah, Alex is going to have to get a beard like that.
Yeah, really, Alex. We can't take you as seriously now.
Clean-shaven young kid.
No. When Alex becomes a Supreme Court justice,
He has to have
and he's
one
got
then.
the robes, then he'll need the beard.
I want to have an English style wig too. That's my goal.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
the powdered
Powdered
wig.
wig.
Yeah. I used to have one of those, a
Oh,
barrister's wig, and it literally rotted and fell apart. No, never mind. Because it wasn't mine. An ancestor had one.
Holy
And
cow.
oh yeah, and it came with its own wooden head, like you put it on a wooden head form.
That is
Which, by the
weirdly
way,
terrifying.
In the old days, in a department store, your hat got steamed. I'm talking now, ladies' felt hats, not and men's fedoras.
Don't judge
Yeah,
me.
but they would steam them to fit your head, and they would change the band and the feather or the dead bird or whatever it was that was the.
Haberdasher had a real job. Wow.
Yeah,
It was fancy.
yeah, but that's why they had the wooden head, because it had to be wooden, so they could put pins into it. These
So they could
huge
form it,
hat pins.
yeah.
Yeah, and then they could steam it or scorch it with something, and you can't do that with styrofoam, not unless you want melted. Oh, never.
Well, on haberdashery, we've reached 1 hour and 15 minutes, and so I think that, this has been a lot of fun. And I tell you what, Ed, this has been like a childhood dream park come true just to listen to you talk about this stuff, because I would have asked you a million questions about, well, what was it like in '79? But we actually, Alex said we talked about doing the show. The really interesting part is actually hearing you talk about some of the design, throw ideas at you and have you come back and seeing some of Alex's messed up stuff. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I know you're friends with Alex, but this stuff is freaking messed up. There are some things I've read from Sea King's mouth, like, whoa, hey. And so,
but that's why you do D&D.
No, it
is.
is.
Get your yayas out.
No,
the things you can't do.
Yeah, Alex, don't do those things.
Daily life.
That goes without saying.
I'm glad they're focusing on you, not me.
I know. I can't think, how's that happening?
Yeah, I was just real quiet here in the background.
Yeah, I'm the weird one in this group. Huh? Okay. Cool.
No problem.
It is amazing how many things that gamers want to know the story behind or hang on your every word that were done for some really stupid reason.
I know that's true.
Like there's the famous story. There's the famous story about the first Electric Light Orchestra album, which was called No Answer. It's because the secretary of the record label phoned them and asked them what's the title, and they weren't home, so she wrote No Answer.
Sweet.
Okay, but in the Realms, actually before the Realms, the Five Shires. That was one of the times. By then, I'd been sent a floppy disk with the format on it, and I was told type in the format. So you can't go long on your word count. It has to fit in these pages, and it would flow. It was a Microsoft Word stationary thing. It would flow everything in the font they were using and in the 2 columns and everything. So I did all that, and I thought, I can't get anything into this book. But if I change the word halflings to something short, hin, 3 letters, bing, I can get about 40% more game into that book. So I just said halflings call themselves hin right at the beginning, and then I just global search and replace,
Nice.
and wow, I had way more space. And
You
that
sneaky
is
devil, you.
and that is a, and somebody says, oh, they were always called hin. Where did that come from? And I'm going, well, I had to fit something into the.
I knew a guy named Hen.
He was short.
Alex Hen.
There's going to be upwards of a dozen people that watch this and now go, "Oh man, I'm going to do that." They're totally going to steal that.
And which is the point, which is what makes this fun, is because Skeeter and I know we're real blessed. We go to lots of conventions and we do this, and we're lucky enough to be in a position where, I get paid to do this, and it's been great. And people want to talk to you and ask you these questions, and oftentimes you're just not available enough. There's not enough of me or enough of everybody else, and to be able to do this with you has been the same, I think, kind of reaction that we get. It's just been great. And so anytime you want to talk to us about this stuff, whenever you feel like it, Ed, we're here for you.
I still remember the first time I met Ed, or actually encountered you, was at PaizoCon years and years ago, like the second or third one they had, when they were in that hotel with that dingy bar that was on the first floor.
Yep.
You were standing on the stairs, and I was like, who is this dude dressed like Elminster? And then somebody said, that's Ed Greenwood, and I was like, shut your fucking mouth. Because I didn't believe it.
Can't be Ed Greenwood.
That PaizoCon, they sent. I was.
Do I need to push stop recording for this story?
No. There's nothing wrong about that. But I arrived early. I was supposed to take a plane from Toronto to Chicago, pre-booked by Paizo, of course, and then from Chicago to Seattle. I'm sitting in the lobby, the lounge, and the plane's delayed, and the plane's delayed. I'm not going to make my connection. I finally go up to the lady for the airline and say, not only have I missed the connection that I'm not in Chicago to make, and she says, oh, that airframe hasn't got off the ground in Chicago. The plane that's supposed to fly you from Toronto to Chicago is still sitting in Chicago, though we can't get off the ground. They're snowed in. I said, so what do I do? And she said, oh, we'll put you on another carrier, which happened to be Air Canada. But I'd gone through customs. So that was the time. That was the time 2 U.S. Marshals escorted me out of a customs cleared area, through a door in which an alarm went off, outside, onto the monorail, to the other terminal, up to customs. And the U.S. Customs guy said, this has been stamped today. What's going on? And the U.S. Marshals leaned over and said, just let this gentleman through. And the customs guy said, okay. And I marched through.
Wow.
And as I'm walking down the thing to get to my plane, I hear the customs guy, so who is that guy?
And they told him, right? You're like, well, here's Ed Greenwood.
No, they didn't know me from Adam. He says, we have to put him on another plane. What's he done?
Wow. Between your air marshal escort and Alex's fancy chair, I just do not feel like I measure up at all.
Yeah, me neither. But on that note, I think that we're going to go ahead and call the recording, because we've had so much fun and we could go on for hours, and we figure that we have an audience that can't. But thank you, everybody, a lot. Ed, thank you very much. Alex, thank you very much. Peter, go get
Alex, I hope we answered or helped you with some of your questions. That was the whole point of this, and we just kind of rambled. But...
And I didn't shut up enough. I should have shut up a lot more so we could get to more
you're the
questions.
reason we want to listen to it, because you're one of the few people on the planet you can say, well, I've been designing games since before you're born, and you're one of the few who can say that, and you do the whole time through. It isn't like you stopped, like, I'm going to take a break and teach school for a while. No, you just kept going.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we're going to call it. Thank you, everybody. This will be up on the YouTube soon. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Zach.
Border Kingdoms. Go buy
the Border Kingdoms.
BOD.
I